Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the assembly. We are ready to start with our session. Today we're going to do an introduction to game development in Unity. This is our first workshop of the series. We're going to start with 2D game development, and then we're going to move into 3D game development later on. So it's going to be a few sessions on each. And today's presentation is going to be done by myself, Zaya, and Rashan. Now, here's our agenda for today. We're going to take you through the introduction about us, introduction about game development. We're going to take you through all of Unity, and then we're going to code a game together. So let's start with who we are. We are a smart lab. We're a makerspace that's based out of In5, and we've done this since 2014. So since then, we've had over 350 free workshops that are on a variety of different topics. But the three main categories that we have are hack, so embedded systems, IoT, and hardware devices like Raspberry Pi and Arduino. So for those of you that have came before, you know that I did a workshop on a Twitter pager done with Arduino MKR. So we did this together. For these workshops, we provide you with the hardware supplies, and all you need to do is just be here with your computer and code along. Now we have code workshops that focus on softwares like APIs, frameworks, creating apps, and we again do this together. You just bring your laptop and we code. And finally, we have data science workshops that focus on topics like artificial intelligence and machine learning. But other than that, we have workshops on robotics, on cloud computing, and so many other topics. Our audience members are very different all the time. We have students, we have university students, we have professionals, entrepreneurs. Anyone is welcome to join. These are free workshops. They're made for you. We just want to make sure that you learn something new, build something new, or expand on your already existing knowledge. So you can find us on social media platforms at Make Smart Things, which is also our mission statement. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We actually live stream these workshops, so you can check out this workshop and the past workshops at any time on our YouTube page, but also on our website, theassembly.ae. Now I'm going to pass on the mic to Rashan, who will take you through the introduction. So Rashan, please take over.
Cool. So let's start off with what even is Unity. So before we get on with that, has everyone installed Unity here? Yeah. If not, you can get it through the link there, which will be on our GitHub. If you guys want to visit our GitHub, you can just scan the QR code here and go directly to our GitHub link. In the repository, you will have access to this presentation.
I would suggest everyone to open the GitHub link because all the code is already on it. So if you don't want to type everything line by line, you can just copy paste it. There's not a lot of code today. Most of it is just dealing with assets. But yeah, please scan the QR code, open our GitHub page. And if you haven't downloaded Unity, please download it.
Okay, so I had a few people tell me that they've already done, they've set up Unity, right? So I'm just going to move ahead. So Unity is essentially a game engine. A game engine is a framework that provides you tools necessary for building or developing games. Unity specifically uses a C# scripting language, so whatever code it compiles in is all compiled in C#. Now, there are other game engines. Three of them, the three most popular, are Unreal, Godot, and GMS, or Game Maker Studio. So Unreal Engine is another super popular game engine. It's used for more 3D games, things with more realistic graphics. It uses C++ for its compiler, so all of its scripting is done in C++. Then we have Godot, which is fairly new. It's the newest of the four. It is a game engine that is designed specifically around 2D games. So although 3D games do work, it's streamlined, like the workflow process is streamlined for 2D games specifically. It uses its own proprietary language, which is Godot script, but it encourages a script-free type of workflow. So it's essentially, if you're not very comfortable with writing or coding, then you can use its built-in tools to make games without but it is recommended that if you're making big games, obviously you do need some scripting language. So as a starter game engine, Godot is a good choice. Then you have Game Maker Studio, which also uses its own proprietary programming language. It's a Game Maker script, if I believe. So Game Maker's Studio is more of it's more of a legacy thing. So people who grew up with it tend to stick around it. For all intents and purposes, we chose Unity as it struck the best balance between ease of learning and variability. So it's very versatile because as compared to all three, Unreal is the hardest to learn because it has a very complex workflow and you'd have to learn C++, which is a more abstract language as compared to C#. So let's look at a few, yeah? Oh, sorry, my bad. So let's look at a few examples of games that were made in Unity. If you recognize any of these three, that's more than enough. So Monument Valley, you guys might have seen on the App Store. It's a very popular mobile game. It's a puzzle game that uses, it's known for its, for illusions made. So all of the puzzles are based off of illusions that were made with perspective illusions. It's also known for its stunning visuals. Then you have Hollow Knight, which is a Metroidvania. That's the genre of the game, popularized by the game Metroid. It's known to be the best of its kind because it combines amazing level design with hand-drawn 2D graphics. So everything there was hand-drawn and then animated using Unity's animation tool, which we will eventually cover. Then you have not as popular, but still very impressive because it is one of the biggest 3D games developed with Unity 3D, biggest as in complexity-wise. Remnant from the Ashes is what's known as a Soulsborne. So if you guys have heard of games like Dark Souls and things like that, that's what this genre is about. It combines different aspects like shooters and Dark Souls and turns them into one game. So these are the three, so as you can see, these are three very different games, but they were all made in Unity. So Unity, like I mentioned before, is a very versatile engine. So you can do, so basically your mind is your limit. So now let's go on to project creation. So I'm gonna go over just setting up your first project. So, yes.
Now, this Unity allows you to build games, okay?
Mm-hmm.
These games are what kind? Is it like mobile games, online games?
Anything. So you can choose what platforms you wish to publish on. So if you're building a game for PC, you can build it on PC. If you want it to be cross-platform, so like mobile apps and PC, that's also fine. You can even develop games specified for Xbox, PlayStation, wherever. We will we're going to focus on PC games right now. Eventually, we will move on to VR, but for now, our focus is PC. The workflow will remain the same because since we're covering rudimentary basics, even if you were to transfer this to app development, in mobile phone app development, the process is more or less the same, save for a few input changes, since it uses a touchscreen. So first thing, we're just going to go over some things that we already did. So everyone has a stable Unity editor, because if you guys use the link, there were two versions. There was the latest version and the latest stable version. The latest version of Unity is where it's basically the in beta testing, so you guys will encounter bugs, but the stable version is bug-free. So that's the version I want everyone to have. That one is the one where you won't run into any editor bugs. So if there were any bugs in the code, that's something that we're responsible for, not a bug of Unity's. Then you have modules. So this is where you'd install or decide which platforms, because you asked earlier. So if you wanted things like Android development, this is where you'd install those modules. Since, like I mentioned earlier, we're just sticking to PC, we won't be using any of the modules. So creating projects and default project location. So by default, it will just take the first directory that comes by default. If you guys want to save your projects, because these are games, so they're big files. If you guys don't want them to be in your in desktop, you can go to settings and choose the default directory that your games get saved in. So if you guys have your own personalized location that you like putting big files in, do it now. Otherwise, you guys can just move on with it. Cool. So does everyone have the Unity editor open? Yeah? Okay, so when you click on create new project, you should see something that looks like this. You'll have a list of different templates. We're going to be making a 2D game today, so click on 2D game, and then in the bottom right hand corner, you can name your project. Name it whatever you like. We just went with test for now since this is a demo. And then once you're done, so the Unity version, editor version on the very top in the center should be around the same. So 2021.3.12f1. Does everyone have the same version? If it's off by like 1 or 2, it should be fine.
14F1.
12f1. If you have 14, then it's fine. That's, yeah. Okay. So once you guys hit create project, it'll take a bit, and then you guys might see a screen that looks like this. Obviously, this is a lot of information to look at. There's always that first experience of booting up a new software and having no idea what you're looking at. So let's go over what each of these sections mean. Okay, so starting with the bottom left-hand corner, you guys are going to see the project tree or the file tree. This is where every folder, every file that's in the project is able to be viewed from here. So if you guys, it's basically a minimized view. If you want to switch between different folders, this is where you do so. Okay. One thing to keep in mind that all of the layout that you see here is interchangeable. So if I wanted to, I can move around the different windows and snap them to different locations. But if we do that and everyone has their own customized thing, it'll be difficult to follow through. So I want everyone to keep their default layout. Then later on, if you decide that, oh, this works better for my personalized workflow, you can change it later. Then the next thing that you guys are going to see is what's basically the expanded view of the file tree. So here you'll see mini icons. So here you'll see like mini icons for what the file type is. So if it's a script, then you'll see like a small script icon. If it's a sprite, like a small drawing, you'll see like a icon of the drawing. So when you're dragging files around, it's easier to work with this instead of just text. But oftentimes the expanded view is swapped out for different things. So if you're using Unity's animator, this is where you'd put the window. So, or if you're debugging, that whole bottom row is also replaced with a terminal. So it won't always look like this. You guys can put other things there. Next, we're going to have the object hierarchy. So like I mentioned before, this uses C#, which is an object-oriented programming language. Hence, why everything in the game is an object. An object is basically what kind of object is based off of what its components are. So a component makes up what kind of object it is, right? So by default, in the object hierarchy, you will see a scene, which is the best way to describe what a scene is it's a level. You can think of it as a level. So it's one instance of what the game is right now. So within that, the resolution isn't the clearest for the ones here, but on stream it should be fine. So what it should say is sample scene and then inside main camera. So by default, Unity will create a sample scene because it needs to display something. And then within the scene, you will have a camera. So here is where you'd see, so this is your viewport. So if you guys see there's a small camera symbol in the middle, that's because right now we're looking at the game through the scene view, okay? If you notice on you guys see right here, you will see the scene view and the game view. They're two different views. The scene view is what you would see as a game developer. So everything that a game developer sees, you'd see here. All your objects, you're able to move them around. Everything is interactable. You can scale objects up and down depending on what you want, move its position. That's what you're seeing here. You'll see every object and its different attributes. Game view, so the other tab there, is what you would see if you selected what a player would see. So it would look at the game through the perspective of the camera. Okay, so if you were playing the game, that's what you'd be seeing. Then right above there, here, you'll see the play button. So when you're testing your game, which you'll be doing very often, the play button here, when you click that, by default, it switches to the game view. Okay. This is the largest we can go, actually. Yeah, just the resolution of if you need a clear view, you can open up our stream and because we're streaming this on YouTube, yeah, if need be. And now, arguably the most important part is the object inspector. So each object is comprised of different components, right? And you can see what each component does here. So right now, by default, this is the main camera object, and here you'd see all of the components that make up said camera. So there's a transform component, which basically lets you move it around or transform it in space. Then you have a camera, which, okay, so you guys see this part here, it's blue in color. That's because when Unity stares off into space, it basically has to render infinity, right? So instead of doing that, because it's not really looking at anything, it's looking at nothing right now. So instead, what Unity is going to do is it's going to just show you a background color. Now that color can be changed here. So as you guys see here, again, it's a little blurry, but just bear with me. You can look through your screens of your own computers. It'll say camera here, so that's the camera component. And then under that component, you have a background color. So just to give an example of how these components work, you will see each of the different various settings of a component in this part here. We'll go over what each component is as they come up, because if I told you what each component does, you guys would be sitting here for hours without even actually getting to make a game. So you can even add more components, which we will be doing very soon. And that more or less concludes what you guys see on your screen. So we'll move on to the actual demo of the game, and I'm gonna let Zaya handle that.
Thank you.
There you go.
Alright guys, so now we can actually start with creating the game. So for those of you that just came in, please make sure to download Unity because we're gonna start coding with it. Alright, so we're gonna open our Unity hub, and you guys should start coding along, so get your Unity open. We're gonna create a new project. Select 2D, and then just change the name of it so it's not the default one. Cool, and then click Create Project, and let it load in. So it takes a bit of time to open this Unity. That's fine. If anyone needs help with installing it, just put your hand up and one of us will come help you. Do you mind helping the guys out? So while the new project is opening, I'm just going to show you what we're going to end up creating today. So we'll just let it load. Cool. So we'll have a simple 2D character they can jump, select, and get points. You can see the score on the bottom. Now if they fall, they'll die and respawn. This is a bit of a hack. If they run into an object that kills them, they will also respawn. So clearly I'm not very good at the game, but once you get to the end of it, you are going to be able to go to level 2. So I'll just show you how it's going to work, and then we're going to create it together. So here we have, this is our level 1, and then level 2 will just be a different scene that will be transferred into it after you've complete level 1. Now let's just see if our new project has been created. It still hasn't. Has anyone been able to open a new project yet? Okay, cool. And do you guys have GitHub open as well? Okay. Okay, cool. So we got the project to open. Let's just max the screen. This is what the default screen will look like for all of you once you get the project open. Now, we'll start off by making, or let's wait until some questions are answered. Okay, as soon as everyone is ready, just let me know and we can continue. So for most 2D games, you can either create your own assets, so you can do 2D drawings and install it yourself, or you can download it from either the asset store for Unity or other asset stores. There's a lot of free assets that you can download. Everything is free to use. There are some paid assets as well. This goes the same to 3D game development. You can either create your own 3D models with Blender or even in Unity, or you can download free ones, or you can do a mix. Okay, I think we'll just start and we'll go a bit slow so people can catch up. But the first thing you want to do is create a new object. So down here, under Assets, right-click, Create, 2D, Sprites, and then Square. So this is going to be our simple square. Yeah? Yes, let me show the QR code. Oop. Okay, for those that haven't scanned this yet, please open up, scan the QR code, open up GitHub. It has code in it, so you'll need it. So the whole project is already pushed there. If you guys want to, well, I wouldn't suggest you taking it in now because we want to build it from scratch, but all the assets are already there, the levels are set up, the code is also there. The code we'll use from it, once you get this opened, here's what you're going to see. So you have an assets folder. If you go into it, there's going to be scripts, and in the script folder, all the .cs files are scripts that we're going to be using today. So we're going to keep going back and forth from this. But in the folder that you open after scanning the QR code, there's also a README file. If you open the README file and download it, this is going to be the presentation that we're going to use, okay? Does anyone else need the QR code? Okay, cool. So we're going to go back. And we're going to start off with adding our object, which we did. This is our little square. Once you drag the square into the hierarchy, we can rename it to player. This is going to be our player object. With the player object, we need to add a few things to it. First is the collider. A collider is making sure that the object doesn't just run through other objects. For example, if you have a wall, you don't want your player to just go through it. It's not a ghost, right? Another thing that you would want to add is a rigid body. A rigid body, I don't know if Rashan already mentioned it, but it is to control gravity. So you don't want your player to just float around in the air. You want it to go down and like be on the floor. So let's do that. Let's add component, box collider. So you can type in box and you'll have two different versions coming up. Click box collider 2D. If you just click the box collider, it is the one that's used for 3D objects, so it won't work on the 2D one. So don't make that mistake. You got the box collider. Now, if you zoom into your object, you can see that it has a little green outline. That's the box collider around it. You can increase the size of X and Y values, but we're not going to do that because then it's going to make it seem like the object is floating and it doesn't properly get into contact with other objects. Now, the other thing that we want to add is the rigid body. So let's add a component. And we'll add rigid body 2D. Again, this is 2D because the other rigid body is for 3D objects. So rigid body 2D. Rigid body 2D is what's in charge of gravity. And then box collider is what's in charge of collision with other objects. So this is our player. It's going to be directly in the camera view, which you could see once we opened up the screen. What we're going to do now is we're going to drag the square into the hierarchy again, but this time we're going to rename it to floor. So we'll save it. Now, you have two objects, they're both in the same location. Click on this button over here. You can see it on the top right. This is going to be the move tool, and you're just going to move this object down. then you're going to click on the size tool and you're just going to increase it. This is going to be our platform. This is going to be the floor that we're going to be on. You can just change the color of it to make sure you're not getting confused. So now we have a floor and we have our object. For the floor, just like for our player, we need to add a box collider. Again, box collider 2D. This is to make sure that both the player and the floor, like, they don't pass through each other. You don't want the player falling through it. So both objects have to have a box collider so that it doesn't go through each other. A box collider. So once you go to add components, you select box collider 2D. Yeah, perfect. So now, if you add a rigid body here, which we added for the player, let me just show you what happens. You start the game, and everything falls. The reason it falls is because a rigid body is in charge of gravity. Now what you can do is you can remove the rigid body completely, or you can change it to static. Yeah, let me repeat it. Yeah. So both, yes, player and floor. Mm-hmm. Yes. Both player and the floor have a rigid body 2D and a box collider 2D added to it. The rigid body for the floor has to be static, otherwise it will fall down with the object. Yeah, a box collider 2D. Let me show you what happens if you don't have a box collider. So let's remove the box collider from the floor. Oh, one other thing, if you want to make any changes to your code, you have to do it outside of the game zone. So you have to stop playing it. Otherwise, the changes won't save. So I unselected the box collider for the floor, and here's what happens. The player just passes through it. This is why you need a box collider, because it gives the collision. So let's put it back. Another thing that we want to do right away is to tag both the floor and the player objects. Because when you code, what happens is you can do on trigger. So for example, if this object is triggered, if the name tag is there. So right now it's untagged, but we're just going to select player. Cool. And then we're going to do the same thing for the floor, but since there's no floor tag, we're going to add a tag. Add tag, add a new one, and type in floor. Now let's go back to our floor object and tag it with the new tag that we created, floor. Cool. Okay. Coding sessions are always the hardest ones because everyone is on a different speed. But are you guys ready? Okay, cool. Now what we want to do is we want to make a new script. A good way of creating scripts is to first make a folder titled scripts. You would do this because once you push your code to GitHub, it's more organized. Same thing here, once your game grows and you have a lot more components, you don't want everything to mess with each other, so you have your own script. Inside the scripts folder, we're going to create a 2D script. Sorry, a C# script. And let's name it player movement. Player movement is like the default way that you would title your script. You would do this for 2D or 3D games. Sorry?
They don't know what scripts are.
Scripts are just like code files that you would use. In Unity, you code in C#. In different game engines, you would use different code. It really depends. But in this case, the language is C#. Cool. So let's open up our code. If you have Visual Studio Code, it will open up with it. So here's how it looks. Cool. Now, what we're going to do, like I've mentioned previously, we were not going to write it like line by line because it takes a while. So we're going to go to our GitHub, into the assets folder, and then into our scripts folder. And here we're going to find the file that we just created, player movement. .cs because C#. And we're just going to select everything and copy paste it. Cool. So when we create movement, for 2D movement, you guys listening?
What's the GitHub?
The GitHub is the code.
Slash assembly.
Yeah, /the-assembly. It's the same QR code that you scanned earlier. The assembly, -assembly. T is capital, A is capital. Within that, your file is Unity Workshop 1. Yeah, give me a second, let me help you out. Okay, cool. So assets, scripts, player movement, and then you would copy paste it into our code. Now, when you create movement for a 2D game, it's quite simple. It's not 3D, so you only move left, you only move right. For jumping, you would use a space bar because it's like the default way. You could use the up arrow as well, but it's better to just keep the space bar because when you do 3D game development and you can move left, right, back and forth, space bar is the default jump. So we're going to keep it the same way here. Now, you would want to create 2 floats. One is for speed. This is going to be the speed of the player. It's going to be adjusted in Unity, so you don't set it now, the speed for it. Then you would create move, and I'll explain in a bit what it's going to be. You're also going to create a rigid body. So we assigned a rigid body for our player. This is going to be referring to our player's rigid body. Then there's going to be jump, because the player should be able to jump. And we're going to create a Boolean is jumping, because what happens is if you just make a jump function, your player can jump unlimitedly. So it can fly, basically. And we don't want that. We don't want it to leave our camera zone. We only want it to jump once. So every time it jumps, the code is going to check if it is already jumping. If the player is not in contact with the floor, that means it's jumping, and therefore it can't jump again. So we're going to wait until it hits the floor to jump. Okay. Now, if you've been here for the Twitter workshop, you know that on all the new files, there is a void start function. This is run once at the start, and then there's a void update function. This update function runs once per frame, so it keeps getting updated, keeps checking. For our start, we're just going to initialize our rigid body. So that is the line for it. For the update, we're going to go into move, and I said I'd mention it later. Here it is. For move, we're only focusing on the horizontal axis. So we're only focusing on moving left and right. That is why you're getting the axis horizontal. Now, for the rigid body, we're going to set the velocity of it. How are we going to move? We're going to create a new vector, vector 2. So if you're doing 3D game development, you would do vector 3. And then we're going to set the x and y. So this is the default, vector x, y. For x, we're going to look at the speed at which the object is moving at, and then move the direction. So like to the left, to the right. For y, in this case, we're just going to keep it stable. We're just going to keep it as y, because we're only changing it when the jump key is pressed. So if the jump key is pressed, and this is the get button down, this is going to be the space bar, and is jumping is false, which means that the player is on the floor, so it's in contact with the floor. Then we're gonna let it jump, and we're gonna create a second vector, so we're gonna add force to it. And the vector is now gonna keep the same thing for x, the default value, because we're not changing it, but we're gonna change the y value to jump. Jump is gonna be the height that we're gonna set in Unity. So now to make sure whether we know that it's jumping or not, we're gonna create two on collision enter. This collision enter is the reason we added tags to the player and to the floor. If the player is in contact with the floor, so we're gonna compare the tag, then the jumping will be set to false. Otherwise, we're gonna create the same exact function, but we're gonna set jumping to true. So this will constantly check whether it's true or false, whether the player is jumping or not. So let's save this code, go back to our Unity game, let it load. It takes a while. There's no bugs, because if there were, they would come up on the bottom here, and you can open console to check it, but our console is empty. So go into your player. Let's just minimize these things over here. Let's add a component, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna write player movement. This C# file is what we just created, so you just select it, it gets added. Now, as you can see here, you can update the speed, and you can update the jump values. We're gonna update it here, and you can keep changing it, depends on what you want it to be. But let's do speed of around like 5, and let's do jump 500. So we're gonna see what this does when we click play. So once you click play, now you should be able to move left and right with your arrow keys, and you should be able to jump with your spacebar. Once you jump, you can see that is jumping is selected. Once it hits the floor, it gets deselected. So this is it. Now with this, one of our problems is that the object can go off screen. So it moves left, it moves right, but the camera it doesn't. It doesn't follow the object. So we can fix that as well.
Let's select the component the descriptor here.
Can you, you can't select the component? Can I see, or can you check? Well, we're just gonna wait a little. Jay, do you mind helping?
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions, or can we continue? It's not working?
Yeah, that's right. It takes a while, then it just goes on. So it's either probably now or probably something that is something not. Yes.
Okay, everything has been debugged. We're all good. Let's go back to our code. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to extend our level, right? We want more panels, so let's copy paste this multiple times. Click on your floor and just copy paste it a few times. Click on the move button and just move it to the side. We can do that again. Move it to the side. Okay, let's save that. Now, again, if you click on it and you start playing the game, you're suddenly out of screen. So let's do a code for our camera movement. Go to your scripts. Again, right-click, create, C# script, and let's make this camera movement. Once again, for camera movement, go back to the GitHub page. Open up the script for it. And we're going to go into camera movement. And we're just going to copy paste this code. So this is a quite simple code. There's only one line to it. For the camera, we have a target game object. In this case, it is our player. We want the camera to move left and right with the player. You're creating a 3D vector for it, and you have your X position, your Y position, and your Z position. The reason we're having a Z position is because most of the times in games, we don't want an object to be behind the camera. That's why we're setting it to -10 and not 0. So if there's anything that might be behind the camera, will still be shown. So everything needs to be on screen. Now, we're gonna transform X and Y with our target. So let's save that. Go back to our Unity. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach that script to our main camera. So click on your main camera, add component, and then we have camera movement. Once you select that, you can see that it says that target is none. So there's no target. Sorry, let me just close this stuff so you guys can see better. There's no target, but our player is our target, so we will just select it and drag it in over here. Now let's save our code and run it. So now you can see that the camera moves up and down with the player, left and right with the player. What we can do, since this game is only going left and right and we're only allowing the player to jump one way, we can go to our code and we can remove the target from the y-axis. So it will just be transform.position. So if we go back, let's save it and run it again. So here, now the camera only moves left and right. It won't go up and down. What we could do, for example, if you wanted to have a game that's not a runner, but rather a jumper, so you have the player goes up and down, you might want to set your X value to like stable, so it doesn't move left and right, but increase the camera view going up and down, so it follows the player up. Cool. That is the camera position. Now, what we can do is we can just show you how you would get to your second level. So in the end of these three floor panels, let's add in our finish line. We can call it finish line. And we could tag it as finish line as well. So let's just enter this, otherwise it will, there you go, it disappears. Enter, click on it, let's move it to the end. Again, we would need to add a box collider 2D to it, and we could tag it as finish line. You don't always have to tag objects, it's not always necessary, but in some cases it is, so let's just keep it for us as well. Now I also think my player is a little slow, so I'm just gonna increase the speed of it. Cool. Now let's just change the color of this as well, so we know that this is our like end. Cool. Let's go back to our, what we can do before we move on is we can make our new scene. So let's title this sample scene as level 1. Enter, reload, just so it saves. And then we're just gonna duplicate it. So copy paste it. And this level 1, we're gonna change to level 2. So now if you go open your level 2, you can see it changes over here in the hierarchy, so you know you're in the correct level. And we're just gonna delete unnecessary things. Let's delete these two so we can tell that we are in level 2. And the floor, we're just gonna make it a different color, so we know that this is a different level. Cool. Let's go back, and now we can go in and make a new script. Yeah, for your camera, what you wanna do is you wanna create a camera movement script for it. So in your scripts, just make a new 2D script. Then you can go back into our Unity page, and there's a camera movement script. You can copy paste it into your script. Attach it to the camera as a component, and then for the target, you would drag in the player. Yeah, that's it. Now, let's do the finish line script. The finish line script is what's going to take the player from scene 1 to scene 2, so level 1 to level 2. We can go back to our GitHub, go into finishline.cs, and we're just going to copy paste this part. It's not formatted, but that's okay. So we have a lot of debug logs. The reason we have that is because we want to make sure that we are actually going to the next level. Now another thing that we added, which we'll have to do now, is we are going to add a score points. So on the bottom of your on the bottom of your screen, you're going to have score. So every time a player selects something, it's going to get added. It's on GitHub as well. On GitHub. So let me just format it a bit so it's easier to see. Because now we're gonna have to look at the scene count that we're in. Oh wait, I think we actually don't need some of this stuff. Yeah, we don't need this stuff, so we can remove this, and we can remove scene count as well. So let's just remove this stuff. We're gonna have one line. It's just an if statement, and it checks whether the object, our player object, has made contact with the finish line object. And if it did, we're gonna increase the scene to the next one. So let's save this, go back to our code, go back to our Unity. Yeah. Finish line, you only need this if statement. And this is the only thing you need in it. because we're just checking if it's level 1 or level 2. So if the contact between player object and finish line object has been made, it will take it to the next scene. You do need to add in the scene management, so using Unity engine.scene management. So again, this is adding namespace to start using scene management and changing scenes. Yeah, we have a scene manager, and it's going to load a scene every time the player object, so you can see compare tag, makes contact with the finish line object. So this is the script that we're adding to the finish line. Okay? So over here, when we go back, we select our finish line, we add component, and then we go finish line. This is our script over here. So see, it says text, but we don't need that. Let's just comment it out. You would keep that if you want to keep like a count of what scene you're in, but we don't really need that. In this case, we're going to count the objects that you're collecting, your points. So now let's go to our level 2. So open up scenes, level 2. We've got to save changes. Once you're here, we want to add this into the scene settings. So go File, Build Settings, and you can see scene level 1 is already here. This is our level 1. Now we're going to add open scenes because we have level 2 open, and it's going to be stored in the build settings. So we have 0 as the first scene, level 1, and then the next one is going to be level 2, and that's going to be the order. You can change the order by just dragging it over it, but we don't want to do that because we want to go from level 1 to level 2. So we're going to keep the default order. Cool. Now we can just close this. We can go back to our level 1. And let's test our code. So we added the component. Ooh, okay, so clearly something didn't work. It could be because of our box collider. Okay, let me just open up this code instead. So we'll change this to this code. So it compares the tag, and then it will load scene level 2. That's what we titled it. Yeah. Finish line has a box collider. Finish line. Okay, let's try again. Let's see if it works now. Cool. So that, once it got into contact with each other, it loaded the next scene. We can go back to our scene, and now cool, now we got our levels done. You would continue doing this. So at the end of each level, you would add a finish line object with the same script, and it would continue going to the next level. Every time you make a new level, just make sure you edit it in your build settings to make sure all the levels are there. Now we can make like a death object. But before we continue, to make things more fun, let's actually create the better looking 2D assets. So what you can do is you can go to different stores. So okay, we've done the setting objects, we've done the scripting, done the movement, player tiles, and we've done the next scenes. So this is what we're going to do now. We're going to make fun objects for it, but we're just going to take it from online. So there's 2 places where you could do it, from itch.io, and you can download free, sometimes not free, but you can download objects from here that you can use in your games, or you can open the Unity Asset Store. You can open it directly from Google, or you can open it from your Unity. So if you go Windows, Asset Store, and then search online, it will open up the Asset Store, but I'm just gonna open it in my browser. Okay. So now we got it open. There's 3D objects, 2D objects. Let's click on 2D. And just wait for it to load fully, otherwise it'll be a little slow. Cool, 2D characters. And now we're gonna go into the pricing, and we're just gonna select the free characters. So see, there's a lot of different options. You can take anything you want, but we're just going to go into the free assets. And I'm going to select this one just because I've used it before and I really like the characters. So Pixel Adventure 1. Once you're here, you would want to add it to your assets, but you would have to make an account, so it'll ask you to log in. Once you're logged in, it will finish loading. And you can open it directly in Unity. So let's open it up. It opens up the package manager. So every time you download anything, it could be a scene, it could be a character, you would want to download it in your package manager, open it from there. So here you can see there's Pixel Adventure 1 and Pixel Adventure 2. First, well, personally, I will only download the Pixel Adventure 1 because I don't need anything else. I already downloaded it, so I'm not going to re-download it, but what you would see is just a download button on the bottom. So you'd click download. But here, after download, you have an import button, so let's click import. It's going to select everything, and we can just keep it in the default selection, so let's import. Cool. We can close this now, go back into your assets, and now you have a special folder for your Adventure 1 characters. So you have there's backgrounds, items, main characters. Let's change our main character. So do you guys have a preference? You guys want Masked Dude, Ninja Frog, Pink Man, or Virtual Guy? Anything? Ninja Frog? Okay, let's do Ninja Frog. So there's animations, but we're not going to work with that now. Let's just select the idle, and we'll take this character. Click on your player, and here where you can see square, instead of it, we're just going to drag in our Ninja Frog. Now, the Ninja Frog is very small, so let's just increase the size a bit. Click Shift, so it increases X and Y together. Now, what you see happens is the box collider increases with it. So we can just go back here. Instead of changing X and Y over here, we'll just do it with this edit collider function. So we're gonna just do it as close to the character as you can, because you don't want it to seem like it's floating over the floor. Oop. There you go. And we have it saved. Now let me just show you what happens when you click play, because now we have a really cool character that we're working with. And now we have a frog that's jumping. Oh, the one thing that we can do is we can fix the Z-axis so it doesn't do flips like that. You can keep it if you want. We won't keep it. We'll fix it. So you would have to go into rigid body, and under it there's constraints. So you can freeze a rotation. We're going to freeze the Z-axis. So now it won't do any backflips. Okay, let's change our finish line as well. Instead of just having a box, what we're going to do is we're going to have another floor panel. We're going to put it over here, and our finish line will be on top of it. You can actually select for example, a trophy. I think so there's checkpoint, and we can make it this one over here. So let's see, there's only one. Finish line. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna drag it in instead of the square. The color, set it to white so it doesn't interfere with the color of the trophy. And we're just gonna increase the size of it as well. So let's make it a big trophy. And now we're gonna edit the box collider as close to the trophy as possible. Cool. Now if we play the game, and if we touch the trophy, we're at level 2. Cool? Okay, let's make our death objects. Let's first do it with the square, and then instead of the square, we're gonna change it into a different design. So let's go into our assets, we'll drag in square, and we're gonna title it, we can do it enemy or we can title it death, up to you. So let's save that. And we're gonna have to make a new script for it as well. So let's open up our scripts. We have a death script over here. Let us copy it. Here we're gonna create a new script. I forgot what it was called. So I think it was player death, but that's fine. Just change it to death, save it. And what this does is if the player comes into contact with this death object, then it will have to restart the game. So we'll have to go back to the start point. So let's save the code, but before we add it to that object, we will make a start point as well. So we have our enemy. Let us drag it a bit to the side. We can actually change it to traps, and then you can choose what you want it to be. We can do fire, we can do like a saw. So let's do this maybe. Enemy here. Let's also resize it. This is our little saw. And we would also want to add a box collider to it because we don't want the player to just go past it. So now we have the enemy, and let's make a start point. So there's two things you can do. With start point, you can either drag in a square as well, or you can create an empty object. Now, because the assets we downloaded has a start asset, we can just use a square and then change it to something fun. So this will be start point, or just start. For our start, we can change it to, oops, checkpoint, start, and it can be this. So let's go start. Let's just drag it in. Here you go. This is our start point. Now when we go to our enemy, we're gonna go back to our scripts. So we did a death script, and we're gonna add it over here under add components, so death. Okay, you have two things that come up. The start point, which is the new object that we created, so we're just gonna drag it in here. This is gonna be the start position where the player is gonna respawn. And the second thing is the player, so we're just gonna drag it in over here. So let's save the code, let's hope it works. Cool, we start. If we accidentally run into this, we respawn. So every time you die, you respawn. Ja. Cool, that's done. Now you can add as many enemy objects as you want. You can just copy paste it so you don't have to keep re-adding the script to it. What you can also do is make an enemy object that you're gonna put on the floor, and you can make it super wide. You can change it later so it's not like, you can just make it transparent so you don't see it. But what will happen is, once you start playing the game, so let's save, run it. We don't want the player to fall forever, right? We want it to die. So as soon as it hits that enemy object on the floor, it will respawn. So that way you don't just have a flying player. Cool, now we got that sorted. What we can do now is have a scoring system. For the scoring system, let's go back to our assets, and we'll also add an empty square, but we'll change it later. And we can name it point or reward. So let's do point. We can also tag it as point. Save, yeah? Yeah. Oh wait, finish line? Oh, the one on there, it's different. So you have to remove everything, just keep the if statement. Yeah, the if statement is the only thing necessary. And the scene management, Unity engine. Mm-hmm.
From start.
Yeah, can you also tell Jade to keep an eye on the stream? You can tell him later, it's fine, I fixed it now.
So the GitHub code is not updated.
Yeah, I was trying to do some changes to it, so just ignore that. That's the only code that I think was a little messy. What that code was for was to count the scenes that you're in. So in some games, you have like you're level 1 and you want us to show that you're, oh, now you're in level 2. But in this case, we're gonna remove that, and what we're gonna keep is the points. So for example, you're in level 1, have you collected 3 points? Okay, that will show on the score. So yeah. So the only thing you're doing is you're creating a new file and you're creating this little function.
There's no intelligence.
There's no what?
Intelligence. When you type the class name,
Oh, I think you have to install something within VS Code so it like completes it for you. Yeah, because like for example on my VS Code at home I have it installed so it auto completes everything. You type in, you just enter. Here it doesn't do that. So yeah. Okay, can I see?
but still fine. It runs by default editor. It was Visual Studio, not with VS Code. But here is what I use. But you have to use that.
On the computer. On the computer. So yes. Okay, is everyone ready to continue? Cool. Have you finished? Yeah. Okay. Huh? Yeah. There's the reward system and then the pause menu left. Cool, so we have our point. Let's drag it in over here. And we can right away change it to something more interesting. So let's go into our assets. I think if we go to items, let's make it a fruit. Anyone has any preferences? Apples, bananas, cherries? Cherries! I like cherries. Okay, let's go point. We'll drag in. I'll just increase the size as well. And we can do it, we can put it on top. So for example, the player has to jump to collect it. So we have the cherry. Let's add a box collider to it as well. And we can just adjust it so it goes closer to the object. Cool. So now we want to make a script for it, but we also want a text field that counts the score. So let us go into the hierarchy, right click, go UI, legacy, and then text. When you create a UI, an event system is automatically entered, and you have a canvas. So if you double click on it, this is your canvas. It's a lot bigger than like what you're seeing right now, like your little game. But once you click play, this will disappear, so you won't see it. The text is just on the bottom. So if you put it in the middle, oops. Like if you put it here, in your game, it'll be at like in the center. Let's put it on the bottom right corner. And we can say score text. Here you can just write score, oops, score, and then you can say 0, because it's 0 right now. And this is how it's going to look. So every time you increase your score, it will show on the bottom left corner. We can make this darker so it stands out more. And for the main camera, like if you don't like the dark blue background, you can change it over here. You would go into the camera and you would just change the color. Cool. So now let's make a script for it. Over here in our Unity, we can go back to our scripts. We already have a death script. We're gonna have a, oh, pause menu level count. Oh, I think I put that, it's a different game. Okay, I'll have to update that. You have a score file. So let's create C#, and this is going to be score. Open up your score, copy paste, save it. This, for some reason, did not get pushed to GitHub. So I'm going to add it to the README file. Okay. I'm just going to add it here for now, and I'll fix it later. So if you guys go into the README file, you can open this, copy it, and then you can paste it into your score file, okay? So for the score, we have our text, which is on the bottom left corner, and this is going to be updated every time the player runs into the point. We have the score count, which will always start with 0, and we have our game object, which is our player. At the start of the game, we want to set the score amount to 0. Every time the scene reloads, it will be at 0. Now, right now, we're not reloading the scene every time a player dies, we're just respawning him. So technically, once the objects are collected, they will be destroyed, and the score will never restart from 0. So you can't collect it multiple times. For your update, you're gonna get the score text, and you're gonna set the score to the amount that, like points that you already had collected. On collision with the points, the player, so you'll first get the text component. So we're actually gonna go back here, and for this to work, we're gonna make sure that the score is titled score text, which is the same thing that we have in our code, score text. Otherwise, it won't be able to find that object. We have a debug log just to make sure that we found it, and we're gonna increase the score by 1 every time a new point is collected. And then we're gonna change the score text back to the new amount. So we're getting the old one, updating it, and then saving it. So, save it. No. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into our point. Let's just minimize the unnecessary things. We're gonna add component, and we're gonna add our score file.
Is this the correct?
Make sure location is correct as well. So for score text, we're gonna drag in our text. For the player, we're gonna drag in our player. Let's save it, and let's see if it works. Boom. And now you can see the score has been set to 1. So what I was telling you earlier, if the player dies, the score will stay 1, but the berry won't appear again. Now there are ways that you can change that, and I can show you in a little bit how you would do it. But let us continue with the final thing that we're gonna do. So first of all, if you wanna add more points, you are welcome to do so. So let's go into here, just copy paste it a few times. Okay, save it. We're gonna make a pause menu. So while you're playing the game, you might want to pause it, whether it's like in the middle of jumping or not, you want the game to stop. So let's make a screen for that. We already have a canvas, so now inside the canvas, what you'd want to do is go UI and then panel. Within the panel, what you'd want to do, and here's how our panel looks. You can actually change the background so it's more see-through. And inside this, we're gonna create UI and then button. This is gonna be our resume button. Resume. Resume button. Because within our resume button, we have a text. So this is where it's actually gonna say resume. We're gonna copy this button and we're gonna duplicate it. We're gonna rename it to quit button. And then for the text, we're gonna change this to quit. Cool. Now let's just move this button, oops, don't move the text. Click on the button and then move all of this down. So now you have a resume button and a quit button. What you would have to do now is add a script to it. So let's make a new script. And this will be resume. Or you can title this menu, because this will be the menu that we're going in and out of. So what happened was I pushed a different game to GitHub. So some of the code is the same, some of the code is a bit different. I'll update it after the workshop. But I think this code is also missing. Oh no, okay, pause menu is here, so we're fine. No, we're not. I'm gonna take it from the other game and then I'll copy paste it for you guys. For now, so you guys can access it as well, I'm gonna add it to the README file. So under the first code, I'm just gonna resume code, and it's gonna be added under it, okay? Game paused is true because it's paused. For quit, you literally just have to type application.quit. This is the default, this is how you quit all games. This won't work when you're testing the game on Unity. This will work only after you export the game. So if you export the file, you can then send it to people, the button will quit and the whole file will close. It won't work on Unity because you're not closing Unity. So let's go back to our game. And what we're gonna do is, just load a little. Okay, we're gonna go into our canvas and we're gonna add component to it. We're gonna as the buttons. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to both of the buttons. For on both buttons, you have an on click. So what happens when you click it? Let's add something to it. Here you would have to drag the canvas because the canvas is what has the code that we just created. And on function, you will now see this menu appear here. This is the menu that we just created. Since we're doing resume, you just have to click on resume function that we just created, okay? Now you would have to do the same thing with your quit button. So let's drag in our canvas. And here, we're gonna set it to quit. Cool. This is how it's gonna look. But what happens is, if we just start playing the game, the menu screen is already here. We don't want it to be there, we want it to be hidden until the escape button is clicked. So you would go into your panel and you would just deselect it. So now it won't be on screen when you first start playing the game. So let's run it. Now if you click escape, this screen will pop up. If you click resume, the game will disappear. Sorry, the screen will disappear. So say you're jumping and you click escape, the player will just stop moving because time is set to 0F. Now if you resume, it'll come back. What I was telling you earlier, quit won't quit the actual game, but you can see here that the debug worked, which means the quit function is entered. This will work if you execute the game. Cool.
How is the escape key mapped here?
It's over here. Input, get key down, and then key code escape. There are certain keys that always work that way. It's the same thing if you did like K, for example, you just put key code and then K. But that's basically it. This is our game, so we can play it. So we get our first point, we get our second point, and we go into level 2. So you would be doing the same thing for level 2. You can extend like the levels, you can make it as complex as you want, but yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys. Yeah,
How about exporting and publishing?
How do you export it?
Export and publishing in different platforms.
So to export it, you'd go into your build settings, and then I think it's build and run. So you would export it. Let's export it to our desktop. Just select.
How to make it mobile compatible?
Okay, I'll show you once it finishes loading. Otherwise, it'll make a problem for me. Here, in the background, yeah, you can select what you're making it for. So you can make a PS4 game or whatever game, up to you.
So it comes out of box, we don't have to do anything. Just export.
Okay, so the one thing that you have to like keep in mind is when you export the game, the words might be a bit out of focus. So as you can see, the score was supposed to be down here. It's not, but this is the exported game. So now this is the file that you would be able to send to other people so they can play from their computers as well. And here's our level 2.
What is the size of the file?
Oh, wait. let's close this. We'll check the size of the file. I'm just gonna minimize everything first. So this is the file, properties. Yeah.
What do you
It's a small game. So
You need an Unity engine to be there, not required.
To run the game?
oh, and here's, so if you click the quit button, it closes the game. So here you know that it works. But yeah, that's it. And then this is the file that you can send to other people. 3D games would be a lot larger, and depends on how many assets you have, it will increase the size. So sometimes you might not even be able to push it to GitHub because it has so many files on it. But that's basically it. Thank you guys so much. Our next session is going to be either on 2D or 3D games. It depends. But yeah, we'll let you guys know soon. Thank you.